Yeah, so I'm Paul Hoban. I'm a director of Blue Sky People. I am a recruiter with 25 plus years experience under my belt, 15 of which in the sort of dental healthcare sector. And during that sort of 15-year period, we've relocated well over 650 dentists to Australia and New Zealand in that sort of time frame. So lots of experience kind of helping dentists kind of understand what it takes to make the move, and obviously helping them with the move as well. So yeah, really tonight's just kind of hopefully sort of informative, general chat around. We've called it kind of myth busting, I suppose. I spend an awful lot of my time, as I'm sure Robin does as well, chatting to people and correcting information that they've got, third parties, friends of friends, and kind of resetting the clock a little bit and saying, okay, everything you think you might know, let's kind of wind it back a little bit and give you the facts that kind of help you make the decision. So hopefully we'll cover off, a big chunk of that this evening.
Absolutely. And thanks, Paul. And for those that don't know me, I'm Robin Vogels. I'm the owner of Personnel Relocations. We are based in Melbourne, Australia. We cover the whole of Australia. I'm also the author of the book, Your DIY Move Guide to Australia, which you can find on Amazon. So if you are one of those brave people that are happy to go alone and fly solo, then do download the book and have a read of that. Yes, and I've been in Australia now for 15 years. I've lived in the UK, Singapore, France, and brought up in South Africa, if you were trying to place the accent. So quite a wide range of experience, and I can relate to most moves. But for those that have just joined us, I know there's been a flurry of about 20 people in the last 2 or 3 minutes. Please feel free to ask any questions in the chat as we go along, and we'll answer those pretty much within the conversations or towards the end of the show. But Paul, I want to perhaps start with, you've told us a little bit about who you are and what you're doing. And as you said, there's a lot of myths around getting a job in Australia. Are there plenty of jobs for dentists? What is the landscape looking like?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is definitely a skills shortage in Australia at the moment, and it is as a country, it's very kind of migration heavy, I suppose, and obviously with sort of 2 years of effective lockdown through sort of COVID, there's significant pent up, demand. I think one of the main kind of sort of issues that we have with sort of dentists that are kind of looking to come out to Australia, it's fairly typical for dentists to kind of target Melbourne and Sydney particularly. And dentistry is not on the skills list at the moment. So effectively, the practices that are looking to recruit dentists have to be in what's classified as a regional location in order to meet the sponsorship requirements to be able to recruit a dentist. As soon as you mention regional, everyone sort of jumps on that and thinks, right, okay, I'm going to be in the Northern Territories, I'm going to be in the Outback.
Yeah, I'm in the Outback, I'm in the desert.
But that, fundamentally, that's not the case. Regional for us generally just excludes kind of Sydney and Melbourne, but we have successfully placed dentists, Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane, but we have successfully placed sort of dentists, that want a kind of more urban environment. We've placed them in Adelaide, Perth and so on. And we're really talking kind of regional being probably the job is an hour to an hour and a half away from Melbourne, Sydney. So conceivably you could live maybe 45 minutes out of Sydney, and you could commute 45 minutes or so to work if you wanted to sort of be accessible to Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane. Look, plenty of opportunities, but the first port of call for us is to say to people, look, if you want Melbourne and Sydney, that's difficult, if not impossible, really.
And I think Australia offers so much when it comes to the weather, to the climate, to, when you're looking at some of those rural areas, I would think you have a lot of people that are interested in Brisbane, but then they might not like the humidity. So somewhere like South Australia, Adelaide is probably more attractive to them, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose you know, a lot of people aren't aware of the variety of climate in Australia, with the, you know,
Mm.
obviously, and the scale of Australia, I think, and
Yes.
you're far better placed to sort of talk about that than I. But you know, I think that you know, look, there are sort of you know, different climates in different regions. I suppose I'm at a slightly different stage in my life to some of the dentists we place in Australia, in that I've got, you know, a couple of kids at sort of senior school age. And for me, you know, my stage of life in particular, but I'd like to think when I was younger as well, that you know, I would have wanted, you know, a beach lifestyle. I'm lucky enough, even in the UK, I only live sort of 400 meters from the beach here in Bournemouth. You know, I love that coastal lifestyle anyway. So for me, although I've lived and worked in London for a period of time, certainly if I was to move out to Australia myself, I wouldn't see myself rushing to go and live in the city. I'd want to make the best of what Australia's got to offer, with a sort of a coastal lifestyle, really.
Yes.
And you know, there's plenty of that available
Yeah.
in big enough towns along the coast, for sure.
Absolutely. And talking about age, I mean, does age affect the visa process? You were saying,
yeah, I think with dentistry not being on the sort of the skills list, you know, the sort of age, you know, does come into play. And again, we've said that we're not in a position to offer kind of expert visa advice, but as things stand today, dentists up until the age of 30 can get themselves into Australia on a working holiday visa. That allows them to stay for sort of a period of sort of 12 months. There's been a bit of flexibility around that post sort of COVID, but general rule is you can stay in Australia for 12 months, and you can work in any one location for any one single employer for a period of up to 6 months. Beyond that, you're really looking at kind of a sponsor visa, which is where the regional, you know, locations come into play.
Yes.
And those visas are available to one of the visas is available to sort of dentists of you know, pretty much any age, as long as they only want to stay in Australia for up to 4 years.
Okay.
But for anybody who's looking to, you know, stay in Australia and potentially secure sort of permanent residency, then there is an upper age limit involved there at 45. So anyone older than 45 would not be able to apply for PR as things stand today. You know, but obviously the way that we work, obviously we work with yourself, Robin, but you know, when it comes to kind of expert advice around everybody's individual circumstances, you know, we would, you know, introduce people to our expert migration advisory agents, so they're getting, you know, they're getting appropriate advice based on their circumstances, and obviously what they're looking to achieve with a move to Australia. Some people want to come out for a couple of years, others, you know, it's a long-term objective to maybe stay, you know, indefinitely.
And I want to just swing around to what we were talking about age and the variety of people that can come to Australia. I mean, obviously I'm moving anybody from CEOs to plumbers to doctors to all sorts of people, but there's quite a range of people, and I think age does come into that also. I move a lot of what I would call empty nesters. So I think you kind of get, and I don't know if you get that in dentistry much, but you get sort of the empty nesters whose kids have already moved out the house, they're well experienced, and they're looking for a bit of a lifestyle change. So I don't know if you get that much in dentistry.
Yeah, we've literally moved to the dentists with the kind of the requisite sort of minimum 2 years post-grad experience that they would need for a sponsor visa, right the way through to dentists who are, you know, very near retirement, and actually are looking for a change of scenery. So, you know, conceivably it could be a dentist who's owned their own practice for a number of years, has maybe sold it and is kind of not quite ready to give up dentistry completely, and fancies, you know, just practicing in a different country at the other end of their career, really. So
yes.
we've worked with sort of both extremes and pretty much everybody else in between, really. You know, we're happy to engage with everybody, you know, and advise them based around, you know, their own personal circumstances.
Yes, true. And the sorry, I was looking at some of the questions that were coming through at the same time, but I'll come back to those. I think one of the things that people have to take into consideration is everybody is different. You and I both know that, but that age, the dynamics of the family, I think you and I both have to be really flexible in what their opportunities are like. And for example, I have a family that I'm moving at the moment where she's an accountant and he's a blacksmith. So they actually want to be in a rural area. And I'm sure you probably have those circumstances too, where somebody actually wants to be in a rural area, because we work with a lot of dual incomes. And that is a big consideration for people, especially now. There's so many personal family attributes that can affect why people would immigrate to Australia. Australia is not that close to anywhere in the world. It's a long flight to anywhere. I mean, literally to get out of Australia is a 4 or 5 hour flight. And I think COVID has shown us that we can no longer just be back home in 24 hours. So there's a lot of family dynamics that everybody needs to take into consideration for sure. And it's not just their immediate family, but their extended family as well. But I'm sure you have some pretty funny stories around people, you know, you sort of worried to say to them, oh, you might need to go regional. And they're like, no, actually, I want regional. I'm happy with that.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've definitely sort of anecdotally had somebody that sort of some years back now, pre-COVID, when the market was a bit flatter actually, and there was, you know, nowhere near the number of jobs there are now. Yes. And I was almost apologetically really sort of saying, look, you know, you're going to have to be fairly regional actually, but I was really only sort of talking sort of coastal Queensland, 2 or 3 hours north of Brisbane, something like that, not even as far up as kind of Cairns. And actually, this particular individual, their partner was a helicopter pilot,
oh, cool.
and they were looking to make sure that he was kept busy ferrying people in and out of rural areas. So, I mean, I can't remember exactly where they ended up, but I think it was way south of Albany even. It was like right down sort of WA, kind of on the southern sort of tip. So yeah, look, I mean, everybody is sort of slightly different. And I think, look, on the other end of the spectrum, you know, we've worked with dentists whose partners are medics and have been offered jobs in city locations, in the hospitals and things like that. Yes. And in those cases, we'll work with the dentist, but they might be on a partner visa or a dependence visa, and in those cases, they don't have to go regional. So again, you know, when we sit down with everybody, and I know, you know, for you in even more detail, Robin, you know, we're really sitting down and saying, you know, look, what are you trying to achieve from a move? What's your personal circumstances? Yes. Because it could be, you know, it's everything from, you know, a dentist who's a couple of years post-grad, who is literally going to turn up in Australia with a couple of large suitcases, you know, and spend a year or two, or, you know, if they love it, they might stay out for 2 or 3 years. Just to get some experience maybe in private practice that sort of they feel is maybe being denied them, with the kind of the marketplace in the UK being sort of quite heavily NHS focused.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, sort of the lifestyle difference for dentists between the UK and Australia, because I think a lot of people that I talk to, that's one of the attractions of Australia. So what is happening? Are they being overworked and underpaid?
Yeah, I mean, you know, look, you know, that sort of, you know, a lot of the people on the call will be well aware of the state of the market, and that's why they're on the call. I think the thing to focus on is sort of probably not the negatives about what's going on in the NHS in the UK. It's headline news on a daily basis,
right.
And dentistry is such a small percentage of NHS funding that it never really sees the kind of the light of day, I think, in terms of, you know, when budget is being allocated. So I think the core difference is, and you know, what we sort of describe about sort of practicing in Australia is, unless somebody's got a very particular interest in working in public sector dentistry, so working in a sort of dental hospital or something like that, and those jobs are fairly few and far between, to be fair. They're going to spend their career in Australia, short, medium or long term, working in modern, fully digitized, private general dental practice. Patient demographics, you know, again, regional variations, but very in tune with, you know, with the UK market. in a good quality sort of mixed or private practice. Regular attenders who turn up for every appointment, 6 monthly scale and polish, annual checkup, and then the others that come in sort of clutching their jaw because I haven't seen a dentist for a few years.
Yeah.
And so I think the patient demographics probably comparable, but we're probably talking about our dentist in Australia on a busy day seeing maybe 10 patients, sometimes less.
Okay.
45-minute kind of appointments, sort of scheduling for checkups and things like that. So I think the pace of work is much more geared towards good quality patient communication, good quality digital equipment, and providing really high quality sort of dental care.
So the dentists can enjoy their work more. Is that what you're saying? They have not only they have a better work-life balance, because Australia is quite big on that, but they can enjoy what they're doing. Is that, are they seeing less patients?
Yeah, I think it's just more quality time. I mean, if you talk to the average dentist in the UK, certainly if they're working, in the NHS, and look, I do a lot of business with clients here in the UK as well, so I'm mindful of that. The number of patients that they're having to see to maintain their NHS targets, means that the throughput of patients in the practice is much higher.
Okay.
It's not it's not that the dentists are not trying to provide the best quality care, but they're sometimes doing it certainly within an NHS system that's got limitations, really. I think that there's three areas that we don't really kind of hear any negativity about around kind of dentists that move to Australia. The pace of work and the quality of dentistry they're able to do. Their income is usually fairly solid as well, and obviously climate and kind of lifestyle benefits as well. Which are three huge tick boxes for people that are looking to kind of make the move.
Absolutely. And just another sort of grey area from me, what you're saying here. So can you describe the sort of process for me? So you're obviously working with an immigration company there. Do you interview a potential candidate, let's put it that way, and then seek advice from the immigration agent as to whether their candidate may be successful in getting a visa? How does the whole process work? And if possible, I know everybody's different, but the timeline for this sort of thing?
Yeah, so there's a mini sales pitch here, I suppose, in terms of
That's okay.
why work with us, why engage with an agent. So I mean, look, we're with 15 plus years experience of taking dentists out to Australia. We're proud of a couple of things, really. I think one is we're the only mainstream sort of dedicated dental healthcare agency that has got a team here in the UK and has got a team on the ground in Australia. So on a practical level, it's not let's get you sorted, let's get you on a plane, and then goodbye and good luck. We've got a team on the ground in Australia that once the dentists land out there can provide sort of practical support. Over those 15 years, we've engaged, we work with a number of partners like Personnel Relocations. And the key thing for us is, like I said, we could have a dentist who's turning up in Australia with, 2 suitcases. We could have a dentist who's turning up in Australia who's packing up a 4 or 5 bedroom house, 2 kids needing schools, 2 Labradors needing to get on a plane and be shipped out and quarantined and what have you. So, everyone's circumstances are different, and we work with experts in their respective fields. So when somebody needs specific visa advice based on their circumstances, we'll engage or we'll introduce them to expert migration agents and lawyers that will sit down and go through all the nuts and bolts on all of the options that are available to them. If somebody needs support in terms of literally packing up a house and the removals, again, we'll introduce them to tried and tested sort of expert removal companies that will take care of all of that. Obviously, I'll throw the question back to you a little bit in a second in terms of schooling and the practical elements of what people need on the ground. because I've got a few questions for you on that as well, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the process for us is that you know, a lot of the dentists that we talk to, we'll talk to them 12 months, 18 months, 2 years in advance of them looking to go. So even right now, I'm talking to some undergrads who are kind of saying, you know, look, part of you know what I'd like to do in the early part of my career is look at Australia and when we go. Depending on the visa, if they meet the age requirements to go out on a working holiday visa, that can all be done relatively quickly. The actual APRA or AHPRA registration process is probably about sort of, you know, 12 to 14 weeks at the moment. So getting, you know, formally registered as a dentist or provisionally registered as a dentist, they can do all the online paperwork. That takes around sort of 3 months. So look, on average, we're probably sort of talking, you know, taking into account that APRA process, very typical for a dentist in the UK to have to give 3 months notice. You know, we're probably talking the average is about 6 months. So, you know, sort of talking to us about where they want to go, what their circumstances are, and being able to sort of go out would be about sort of 6 months for a dentist who's able to use the working holiday visa. If we're talking about sort of a dentist who's looking to longer term secure PR and they need, you know, much more comprehensive visa advice, and actually the employers are going to have to go through a lot of labour market testing and so on to meet the visa requirements, that's probably closer to sort of 6 to 9 months really. And that's kind of that's having interviews, you know, with the prospective employers, agreeing a contract, and then starting all that sort of
and
paperwork.
I would think you've got a fair market hold, if I can put it that way, because you're quite niche. You know, I work with a lot of recruitment companies, but nobody that is as niche as just working with dentists. So I would think that you've got quite a base of vacancies available, or
I mean, we're
working with.
Yeah, again, we look. I suppose that's another sort of benefit of kind of working with ourselves. Really, is that again we sort of pride ourselves on being sort of pretty much whole of market. So any sort of clients that are used to recruiting from the UK, are capable of recruiting from the UK and able to support that move, and or are looking to recruit from the UK, they'll be aware of us. They'll have engaged with us. And again, having a team on the ground, our team on the ground also does, you know, dental practice sales and acquisition. So they're very connected to what's going on in the market, you know, from a sort of commercial business development perspective. Look, occasionally people will land the job. You know, they'll certainly the guys that sort of get themselves out to Australia on their own and they're going to do a bit of traveling around. Occasionally they'll land on a job that we're not aware of, and you know, we wouldn't claim to own 100% of the market, but we're probably 85% of the decent jobs.
That's pretty good. Yeah, that's good odds.
Suitable for visa sponsorship. If they're not live with us, we can rattle the branches when we know somebody's coming. And I think sometimes that's important to know, sometimes for specialist dentists as well, you know, that we'll actually go and do some market creation. So if we've got a specialist orthodontist who's looking at going out to Australia, or a specialist oral surgeon, you know, it's not necessarily that they need to see that we've got a job advertised, and if we haven't, they can't talk to us. We're very much around, you know, look, if we need to create market, we've got so many contacts, you know, in Australia, clients that we've worked with over, you know, a good number of years, that will very often hire opportunistically as well. So they'll create an opportunity. An endodontist is a classic. You know, if there's any endodontists on the call here, it's
raise your hand now.
It's the same as the UK market. Once somebody knows there's an endodontist kind of in the building, the patients get whizzed down the corridor to them straight away. So you know, so with sort of, certainly it's probably worth highlighting those specialist roles. It's not that we have every single job in Australia advertised at any given time, but if we know we've got an orthodontist who's got, you know, just as an example, family in Brisbane and wants to head out that way, you know, we'll do market creation. We'll reach out to all of our clients in that catchment and say, you know, look, we've got a good orthodontist on their way. You know, what opportunities have you got?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm
think
putting Paul's email address into the chat right now. So if anybody needs to contact Paul, please do. I'm popping that into
any of those endodontists out there that want to go. Yeah, I mean, I think, sort of, so look, for us, it's we're at the front end, I suppose, or I am here in the UK. So I'm always sort of talking to everybody about their wants, needs, and what they're looking to do, about, to sort of get out to Australia. I'm going to throw it back to you a little bit, Robin, now, in terms of sort of saying, what's your typical, I suppose, pitfalls, the people that reach out to you because maybe they have DIY'd it and they're now out there and are struggling. But also we were chatting the other day, particularly about the kind of the property market, and what's going on out in Australia. So, for the guys that have, they've now transitioned past me and are now, booking those flights and are heading out, what are the kind of the pitfalls and the variances that they need to be aware of? Sort of on the ground?
I think, and we'll perhaps just focus on the UK at the moment, because I think most of the people on the call are from the UK. But I think what people underestimate is a few things. One is that the whole of Australia is not like Bondi Beach. There are variations in climate, in humidity, in rain, in deserts. There's a lot of variation. So not everything's like Bondi Beach. I'm in Melbourne, and I'm quite surprised at how many people underestimate how cold it can get in Melbourne, expecting it to be hot and sunny and lifeguards on the beach every day kind of thing. So definitely, I think people underestimate some of that. They underestimate the size of Melbourne. And we spoke just now about dual incomes. And I have a lot of doctors, dentists, and even other executives who both partners are working, both are professionals, and perhaps both have secured work before arriving in Australia, but have underestimated the size of Australia. And one might be all the way down the Mornington Peninsula, and one is in Geelong. Now, those two areas look quite close to Melbourne, but they're probably, if you had to drive from one to the other and not take the ferry, you're probably a good hour and a half away from each other. So one of them needs to compromise. One will be close to work and the other won't be. So I think the size of Australia is often underestimated. And I think proper budgeting, there's a lot of pitfalls that can come into your budgeting. There's a lot of hidden costs. So going into a hotel, for example, if people go into a hotel when they first arrive, or a serviced apartment is what we call it here, which is sort of a self-catering. So that's got a kitchen and everything. People might book that for 4 or 6 weeks. That and your furniture removals can end up being your biggest costs. And saving money on those is imperative, basically. So underestimating how many hidden costs are involved in those sort of things. So if I take the removals, for example, how many times I see the question on social media about, I'm moving from Birmingham to Brisbane, can somebody tell me how much it is to move a container? And it just blows my mind, because there's so many variables to a furniture removals quote that you can't compare one to the other. The access for the house, whether you need a shuttle vehicle, parking permits, the type of packing. So there's all those things that come into it, and people must give enough time to get quotes done properly, preferably from similar removalists. I could probably sit here all day and give you all these variables that, the mistakes that people can make that cost them money. When you're sitting in a hotel, you're eating out. When you don't have a relocation person to help you choose suburbs, you're driving around and then eating out. Those are all hidden costs, not including things like school uniform or books into your budgeting. Those things can be unwanted surprises when people arrive. So yeah, I probably sit and talk to you all day about things like that, but everybody's different. And I think people need to, if you're saying it's taking perhaps 6 months in advance to a year, 2 years, sometimes it's taking the same for you to actually budget and prepare for your move as well, and make sure that you've got the right information.
What about, sort of just, rental and, with something we come across sort of quite a bit that, from dentists that, actually the rental market operates kind of quite differently out there.
Yes.
And I would suggest that the vast majority of our dentists that are on the call or that we've worked with, they're going to spend some time in rented accommodation, whether it's because they're only staying in Oz for 12 months or even if they're staying long term, it's going to take them 6 months to maybe buy a property or find a property they're interested in. So and I know you were saying with kind of an influx of students at certain times of year and so on, that the market has gone through some crazy periods where it's been difficult to find accommodation. So I just wonder if you could sort of elaborate on that a little bit, really.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Australia has a rental shortage. We've always had a rental shortage. So I know when I lived in England, you could go and view a rental property. You could perhaps go back and have another viewing the next week. You could chat to the landlord, get a few things fixed. It was pretty casual, not casual, but it's a longer period of time. Here in Australia, we have a rental shortage. So what happens is the estate agent will advertise that a rental property will be open for inspection, and that inspection is 15 minutes. That is it. You go in, you inspect it along with everybody else that's coming to the inspection. So all your competition for the property, which could be 20, 30 people. I've been to viewings of apartments this week, sort of just inner suburbs of the city, easily 50, 60 people at each inspection. Everybody then goes away, they apply for the property. The estate agent will shortlist between 3 to 5 applications that they'll present to the landlord, and the landlord chooses who goes into the property. Everything is pretty much online. There's no personality in it whatsoever. So yes, it's a very different rental market in Australia. There is a rental shortage. There's a lot of competition. So having your application ready to go and 5-star, every box ticked on it is important. And the estate agents also use different platforms for the applications. So you have to make sure that you're applying on the platform that the estate agent's using. It's no good. I have some people who have phoned me up and they say, I've been trying for 3 months to get approved and I keep getting knocked back. But they've perhaps set up their profile on realestate.com.au and they're just sending all their applications via that website. But the estate agent's not attached to that website, so all the automation is just not even working. So their applications aren't even going through. So understanding the process before you arrive, there's what I call screamers, especially at this time of year. And this time of year, and I know, Paul, you and I were discussing that the other day, because you were saying you get a lot of people that move around September. I think it was something to do with registrations or something. But for us, this now, December, January is our busy time because a lot of people are moving for the start of the school year, but it's also the most expensive time of year to arrive because it's high season. So those hotels are costing more. The removalists are all busy in summer here, so they overquoting, they're loading their quotes because they don't necessarily need another 10 jobs. Everything is just much more expensive in high season. But I know you were saying something about, was it September?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's very typical for us because the foundation sort of training sort of cycle, if you like, finishes in September. Anybody that goes off and does a hospital post again finishes September time usually. So, and then anybody that's sort of come out of that cycle into working in general practice it typically ticks over another year at that practice every September as such. So we see a bit of a spike with sort of dentists who typically say, look, I want to come out sort of, September, October, November time. And again, that can lead to, sort of a bit of a sort of a glut of CVs kind of going around the market at the same time.
Yes.
So look, we just sort of encourage people that although, yeah, look, it seems like a good time to go because it's sort of part of your annual cycle that you're used to, spreading those arrivals, throughout the year. you know, is better business for us, because it means that we can, you know, home in with the clients on, you know, the dentists that you know, are keen on the locations, rather than it being a bit of a, like I say, a bit of a glut. And I think what happens is, you, like you're saying about your removals guys and the estate agents, they actually get a bit complacent. So they almost kind of go, well, we don't need that, you know, that not one more client from the UK moving a container or whatever. You know, and I think sort of sometimes it's fair to say, certainly that the group clients, the bigger clients, they probably get a little bit complacent. They see, you know, 30, 40 CVs coming through, you know, in a period. They're probably not quite as efficient as turning those around. And again, sort of working with us, I'd like to think that, you know, we go, okay, well, we'll move on then. You know, if one of the bigger players isn't interested, we're making sure that CV's out to another 3 or 4 or 5 clients. But, you know, certainly we do hear it again, probably, you know, sometimes from the dentist that sort of DIY the move and send their CVs out directly. It feels like it goes into a bit of a black hole, and I think that can very much be the case September, October time. They can send their CV into a Bupa or one of the sort of the bigger organisations out there, and find that it's very slow getting a response. Again, you know, that's where our guys sort of come into it, sort of boots on the ground. They send the CVs, they haven't heard from the clients within 48 hours. They're picking up the phone or WhatsApping the clients to sort of say, you know, have you had a look at the CV? Have you got anything new coming up? They're sort of, you know, not pestering as such, but they're, you know, they're busy bees kind of making sure that CVs are getting looked at. And so very often we find our CVs, you know, probably get pushed up to the top of the email list a little bit, because, you know, we're actually saying, have you looked at it? Why haven't you looked at it? This is a great dentist.
You're missing it. Yeah.
And also I think, look, you know, I'm kind of going to blow my own trumpet a little bit here. You know, bearing in mind what we said, that like sometimes we'll have talked to a dentist, you know, 12 months ago. I might have met them at a trade show. I mean, there's a couple of guys on the call here tonight who that I've recognised that we've actually met in person at trade shows and road shows we've done. And the clients take that on board. They know that in a lot of cases we've done at least an hour on Zoom with somebody, but in, you know, probably 50% plus of the cases we've met in person, trade shows or in the hotels, on road shows and stuff. And the clients, you know, they take that on board. They know that our dentists are, you know, pre-qualified. They're highly likely to come. They've had expert advice. They've probably engaged with you. They've probably had a chat with the migration agents if they need specific visa advice. So the clients do take that quite seriously, that, you know, when we sort of say, why haven't you looked at that CV? You know, that's a qualified candidate. We know them, we've met them, you know, we've been talking to them for the last 12 months. They're coming in the next 3 months, you know.
If you don't get them, somebody else will.
Exactly. When are you guys going to interview? And we take no shame in kind of hounding the clients and sort of saying, look, when are you available to interview these guys? You know, so that's the job that you know we do, and the service we provide ultimately. But
we've got a couple of questions here. I think let's just get through some of those, because there's a few wrapping up. So Kenny's asking, is Australian dentistry fully privatised? What is the income difference of general dentistry between UK and Australia? Now that's quite a big question, and obviously personal circumstances. I'm going to sound like a politician on this one. I'm going to swerve a little bit. That's okay.
So yeah, I mean, look, fundamentally, general dental practice in Australia is private. So the patients will, a lot of them will have some insurance cover as part of their Medicare or whatever. So they may have some provision for dentistry or a percentage of contribution for treatments in their healthcare, family healthcare plan.
Yes.
And that, again, that's a personal choice. So some will, some won't. A lot of fee per item dentistry. There is a public sector dentistry provision in Australia, but it's typically, I suppose, a bit of a hybridization probably of sort of a dental hospital and what people might experience as community dentistry here in the UK. So it's I think a lot of it's sort of designed really around high needs access, low income accessibility, people that don't have medical cover, and then obviously more complex kind of sort of hospital sort of dentistry. Those jobs, we don't do a huge amount of business in the public sector, but if somebody's very, very keen, or is maybe a specialist, sort of a special care dentist or something of that nature, then we're happy to again look at opportunities for those people. In terms of
I think Carly's got a question along those lines as well, which is, are there opportunities in the way of pediatric dentistry and community dentistry? So I think that's along the same lines as you
yeah
say.
so look, it's not to be honest, pediatrics is a relatively small specialism. Special care dentistry, again, relatively small sort of specialism, so there's an equivalently sort of lower number of jobs in those specialist fields, as you'd expect, but yeah, look, we're happy to sort of talk to anybody with particular sort of special interests, and obviously try and work with them to find opportunities. But the issue with sort of public sector sort of dentistry is that they don't typically like to sponsor, so
Right.
you may find that you're restricted in terms of a relatively short sort of contract,
Okay.
but yeah, happy to work with anybody on working around that.
Okay.
Trying to sort of cover the finance side of things, but this is where I am going to be a bit of a politician. I suppose the standard question I get asked is what does an average dentist earn in Australia, and it's a bit of a case saying, what is an average dentist? The dentist incomes in Australia, particularly working in sort of private general dental practice, is constrained only by their clinical competencies. So somebody who's got a couple of years postgrad experience is not necessarily going to have the same kind of income potential as somebody who's done a master's in endodontics, doesn't necessarily have to be a specialist, but is comfortable with sort of composites and veneers and sort of a degree of sort of cosmetic and restorative dentistry. Relatively, look, I think it's easier to sort of say that if you are prepared to look at sort of coastal Queensland, New South Wales, those kinds of locations, you're not sort of going city-based, you can have a very, very comfortable living where you earn proportionally, exchange rate, the winds shift sort of on a daily basis.
Yes.
Proportionally, sort of, it will feel like you're earning sort of a bit more than you do in the UK in terms of the main thing, which is your disposable income. Your cost of living is probably, sort of comparably less. Your earnings potential. Dentistry is expensive in Australia, so good dentists working in general practice earn a good living, and they're probably not spending as much, but again, all that's contingent on your lifestyle choices and how much you spend away from.
But Australia has so much to offer, and so many free things, if I can put it that way. Your cost of living here and just being outdoors and having that different lifestyle is just that's got to be taken into consideration, I think. Or I'm just plugging Australia, but
no. And again, I can only sort of talk as a 40-something now with kids and stuff, and we economize as a family by getting the bikes out, getting down the beach, hiking in the New Forest and stuff like that. And I think that's the sort of the thing in Australia, is that you don't necessarily have to find, the climate's conducive to you being outdoors. So you don't necessarily feel like you've got to go for a curry, or you've got to go, because it's dark and it's raining at 4 o'clock in the evening. You've got to sort of find a restaurant or a bar to catch up with your friends. You're more inclined to probably do that outdoors. So probably your cash burn rate is maybe not quite so high.
Yes, I think we have longer days here, which is important. I mean, in summer here, I can be sitting on the beach at 9 p.m. and just watching the sun go down, so you've got a longer day. But even in winter, it's only getting dark sort of 5, 6 o'clock. So we have a bit more time than you do. Rebecca's asking, do we need to have a portfolio to get a job?
No, standard CV is fine. I mean, it's always useful if you're engaging with a client, if you want to back that up with a portfolio. But no, I mean, we just ask everybody to sort of start off with a standard CV, but obviously detailing your core clinical skills really. You know, any courses that any postgrad courses that you've been on, any sort of more advanced dentistry procedures that you're doing. I think, you know, certainly for some of the dentists that are possibly a bit earlier in their career and have maybe only operated in a kind of predominantly NHS practice, they're potentially going to walk into a practice. I mean, having said, yeah, most good quality sort of NHS practices nowadays in the UK are digitized, but the dentist might not have worked with sort of 3Shape scanners and CEREC machines and do same day crowns and things of that nature. You know, I think the sort of dentistry in Australia, and this is a bit of a generalization, but it is following the kind of brighter, whiter, straighter, you know, sort of the UK market. Really, people are a bit more kind of aware of their smile. You know, short-term sort of orthodontics and you know, sort of you know, minor sort of cosmetic sort of dentistry and stuff is ramping quite significantly out there. But good quality general dentist, if you ask the majority of our clients where the sort of the bread and butter of the market is, you know, they say good quality, you know, family general dentistry.
Awesome. There's quite a few questions around the application process and how long that would take. One person's asking about the holiday visa and another one for 2 years post-grad. And I think we've pretty much covered that. I think it is quite specific, and I'd probably encourage those people to get in contact with you. Is that okay?
Yeah, I mean, look, there are some people on the call that I know we've spoken to sort of in the past, who obviously sort of on for a bit of a refresher, and always happy to re-engage. You know, basically our starting point, for everyone's benefit, we offer a free, you know, one-to-one Zoom consultation, usually with myself, to really just talk through, you know, your specifics, what you're looking to try and achieve, when you're looking to go, how long you're looking to stay. You know, if you've got friends, family that, you know, mean you're targeting particular locations, you know, we'll look at homing in on sort of all of that detail. So, you know, anybody that wants to sort of, you know, engage and get more information, we offer up that sort of free consultation. Anybody we've already spoken to, it doesn't mean I don't want to talk to you again. You know, yeah, always happy to kind of set up another call if we chatted, you know, 12 months ago, or we bumped into each other at a dental show, and you're keen to now kind of move things on. So yeah, when it comes to kind of like that sort of more direct sort of information timescales that we're working towards, we'll do that very much on a one-to-one basis based on everyone's circumstances. Because whenever we sit down with somebody, again, slightly anecdotally, who says, oh yeah, I'm thinking about going in the next 6 months, they'll kind of come back to me and say, you know, occasionally like, oh, actually I've managed to get myself on a composite course that that I applied for, so no, that now dictates, you know, when they might be looking to
opens up
go.
opportunities. So, and things.
Yeah, there's always something that crops up, or occasionally somebody will be offered a hospital post or something like that, and they'll want to delay for 12 months. So everything's fairly fluid, and that's
I think the important thing is to start talking and you know, open that conversation and have a look at your personal circumstances. Rebecca's asking, do you also do recruitment for dentists in main cities with a visa, de facto partner, to work anywhere else? So I think she's saying she's got a de facto partner. And
so I'm assuming that's sort of, somebody going on a dependence visa. So look, we have, you know, we've worked with a couple of dentists fairly recently, one in Melbourne, actually two in Sydney. Look, it is very competitive in the Sydney, Melbourne markets. I always try and liken it to, you know, an Australian dentist who wants to come to the UK and wants to work in a nice private practice in London. You know, there's a good number, if it's a good practice, you know, good patient base, good reputation, there's, in those city locations, there's a few Australian dentists that are probably chomping at the bit for those jobs as well.
Yes.
So I would just say, you know, yes, we will. Anybody that's working on dependence visa, but it requires a degree of patience. You know, you might not be guaranteed a job before you get out there. You might have to work in a couple of practices part-time, but yeah, we'll always do our best.
And do you help with part-time work as well? You know, in those sort of circumstances, if somebody's come under de facto or they maybe coming out here studying
on a dependence visa, you know, they can work part-time. Anybody that is, and again, on a working holiday visa, you can work part-time for the duration that you're in Australia on that working holiday
or
visa.
if you're studying, I guess, if you're perhaps studying here and you want to work. Yeah, okay.
Absolutely, yeah. I think you're normally limited to sort of like 20 hours or something, aren't you? Or certainly that's the equivalent in the UK for students. They're eligible to work for up to 20 hours. For us, when you move on to the sponsor visas, that's well worth highlighting. That is a full-time sponsorship. So you know, the government stipulates that, you know, if in order to be sponsored, you've got to be working a set minimum of hours, and that is the equivalent of a full-time sort of job. So you can part-time on a working holiday visa and dependence, but yeah, certainly when it comes to sponsorship, yeah, we can't do part-time basically.
Okay, wonderful. I think we've answered most of the questions that we can. And of course, I've put both of our email addresses in the chat, so anybody can contact either of us. Our websites and emails are there. So if anybody has any more questions, please feel free to email either Paul or myself. But Paul, I've got one more question for you, and I just thought it would just be a way to sort of close off and find out, but what has been your most unique client or your most unique situation?
Yeah, I mean, a couple, I suppose. You know, one, I think I've mentioned anyway, that the individual I was apologetically kind of offering, you know, some work a few hours away from Brisbane, who ended up, you know, 8.5 hours away from Brisbane, in literally the middle of nowhere. That was pretty unique. But look, we've worked with people at sort of, you know, all ends of the kind
shapes
of the age
sizes
scale, and I very early on, I worked with a dentist who was it was prior to the age limit reducing to 45. He was in his mid-50s, had owned a couple of practices, and was just randomly chatting to him about sort of doing some locum work in the UK, and mentioned we were talking about, you know, we were looking at Australia. He said, "Oh, I might go to Australia. I worked in Canada for a bit." With literally from that conversation about taking a locum job in Cornwall, he was in Australia within 3 months. He told me he would never ever own a dental practice ever again. And within a year and a half, he bought a dental practice in Australia. So
wow.
Never say never, I suppose. But
no, exactly.
Yeah, I think that was literally the fastest we've ever taken anybody out from start to finish. Within 3 months.
I think my fastest relocation reminds me of a young Russian man that I was relocating, and he arrived from the airport. He wanted to go straight out that day, and I'm always cautious and saying to people, jet lag, don't underestimate jet lag, you know, just do your bank account on the first day and go back and rest, kind of thing. But he was very, very Russian and very kind of no, I want to go and see these apartments. So anyway, I had booked probably 4 or 5 inspections for that day, and I'll never forget him with his little briefcase, and he walked into the first apartment and he said to me, "This will do." And I was like, "No, we've got a whole bunch more." "No, this one will do. I will have this one." And it was literally within an hour. So that's definitely been my fastest relocation. But I think a bit like you know, everybody's different. And that's what I love about the job, is that you can just try and change and meet the demands of every different family, because everybody has so many, you know, I'm working with an accountant and a blacksmith who needs to be doing horseshoes out in the country, or, you know, everything is just so different. Everybody is different, and their needs are all different, and that's what I enjoy about the job.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't say sort of at the beginning of the call, but my sort of background, sort of pre sort of healthcare. I'm actually an oil and gas engineer by trade, and
Really?
so I've always been, sort of before getting into recruitment, but I've always been an advocate for people studying abroad, working
Yeah.
abroad, going and experiencing, a life outside of their own country. I'm married to a woman whose parents immigrated to the UK from India, in the 60s and stuff. And
Yeah.
I would just advocate, I think, just in conclusion, we said we'd try and keep it to an hour, and we've got,
Yeah.
2 minutes, so we're in good shape. I just advocate to anybody really, go and give it a go. It's very, very rare that we take somebody out to Australia, even if they come back 18 months later or 2 years later, sort of saying, I've had a sort of a crack at it, but life and family and everything's back in the UK. Very, very rarely is there ever anybody that sort of says it's it hasn't worked out. I think if I'm being honest, in the years that I've done this, probably the handful of people that have left Australia, having not had a great experience, it's been nothing to do with Australia. It's
those family
generally
dynamics usually.
It's family back home, elderly relatives, or something sort of out of their control that's been a cause for them to return sort of sooner than later. So it's kind of a bit of a case of what's the worst that could happen. Go and give it a go for a couple of years, 3 years, 4 years. I'm a great advocate.
No regrets.
Living and working.
No regrets. Yeah. So for those that are watching, I think, Paul, what we should do is perhaps catch up again in a couple of months' time. Maybe we can bring an immigration person on, or a removals team, or I think we could go further with this. So if anybody is, I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah,
maybe I think, a real life dentist.
I mean, look, as we've said, like everything we've talked about kind of visa related is in the public domain, and it's not advisory, it's just sort of conversational. But I think, judging by a few of the questions that we had sort of pre the call, and certainly sort of during, it'd be great to probably get our migration agent on and really sort of drill down in a little bit more detail from somebody who's legally able to provide the advice. Drill down into a bit more detail. There is, as well, with the free trade agreement that's now been signed sort of post Brexit between Australia and the UK, there are some potential changes that could be coming, it may well be that the migration agents might have the inside track on that a little bit and be able to tell us what those changes may be when they do come into effect. I don't think I would highlight, I don't think it's going to be anything negative. I don't see any visas shutting down. It's probably all going to be positive. Might increase age profiles and things like that. So I definitely think a follow-up call with migration agents, and maybe sort of our currency guys that can help people opening bank accounts and those kinds of things. We've got an expert for every area really, so it'd be good to get someone on the call. Yeah,
I think we should get a few more people on the call. So if you're watching this, Paul, have you got a newsletter or anything? How can people get in contact with you? How can they stay in contact with you to get any updates?
I think just via email. Look, anybody that wants more info, reach out to me on email. As I say, we'll do our kind of one-to-ones. I mean, very much the way that we work is, again, everyone's circumstances are different. Everyone needs slightly different advice based on their circumstances. So we'll introduce our partners, to individuals, based on what their needs are. So when people need to open bank accounts and get themselves set up, again, we'll introduce the guys at that point. If somebody's packing up a house, needs removals, if they've got pets, and so on. So it really is a tailored service based around what everybody's individual circumstances are. So let's start the conversation. Anybody that wants to get into the nitty-gritty details a bit more, and once people are kind of formally registered with us, any updates on webinars and any other advisory stuff that we do will be sent out. We'll also be, it's probably worth mentioning, we'll also be at the dentistry show at the NEC in Birmingham I think it is on the 13th and 14th of May. Last year we had sort of 3 Australian clients in country for that event, and introduced probably 20-25 dentists to those clients who actually had interviews, you know, while they were there, and a good number of those have subsequently gone on to join, you know, one or other of those clients. Not too sure how many clients coming for the dentistry show in May, but we'll be there, and you know, great chance to meet people in person.
See you in the real world. Yeah, perfect.
Absolutely, yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. All right, lovely. Thank you so much, Paul. I appreciate that. I hope everybody's found it informative. Do contact us. Watch on our websites. You can subscribe on my website. There's various free downloads that will really help you, like cost of living downloads, relocation checklists, and I'm always running these sorts of webinars as well. So if you're interested in any more information about helping you to prepare for Australia, and I'm across social media as well. So would lovely to meet any of you out there if you've got any questions. Thank you for your really positive comments as well. And thank you, Paul. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Robin. And thanks everyone for jumping on. I was really pleased by how many people were sort of keen and interested. Not entirely surprised with the weather and the state of the economy and everything else going on in the UK right now, but pleasantly surprised that
come to Australia. The sun's shining.
Hope to speak to you all in due course, as and when you're ready to find out a bit more.
Lovely. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a good evening and a good day wherever you might be. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks all.